You can join in all this morning's debates by logging on to bbc.co.uk/big questions. Follow the link to the online discussion. You can tweet using the hashtag BBCTBQ. So, our last big question: has the West misunderstood Buddhism? And if you'd like to apply to be in the audience of a future show, email audience@menton.tv. We're going to be in Bradford next Sunday, Cambridge on January the 21st, Newcastle upon Tyne the week after that. We're on the road. So this Thursday marked the 70th anniversary of independence from Britain for Myanmar, formerly Burma. And it was in colonial times that the British brought the Rohingya people, Muslims, from former Bengal to the Rakhine province in Burma to develop the land for farming. Now, during the war with Japan, the Rohingya people were promised independence by the British, but this promise was revoked when the Second World War ended. So, Britain has had a hand in the fate of the Rohingya people, now being forcibly evicted from Rakhine province by Buddhist soldiers in what the UN Commissioner for Human Rights has said may be declared a genocide. No country is coming to intervene. No one is suggesting direct military action. Nothing will be done. Yet Myanmar is predominantly a Buddhist country, a philosophy whose 5 moral precepts include not harming any living things, not taking something which is not yours. So how can a Buddhist country treat people who've lived there for generations so cruelly? Has the West misunderstood Buddhism? Let's talk about that now. Zarni, activist and scholar. There's a kind of Western cliche, the kind of Richard Gere thing, isn't there, about Buddhism? It's sort of incense and inner peace and all that. Is that misplaced?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the fact that we are having this debate itself is affirmative to your question. Has the West misunderstood Buddhism, vis-a-vis Islam or other religion? And there are 2 points I want to make. One is when a terrorist bomb blew up in Paris or Barcelona or wherever, Muslims are made to feel that they need to apologize. But when, Buddhist countries such as Burma or Cambodia under Khmer Rouge or Sri Lanka, Sinhalese Buddhists committed like war crimes and crimes against humanity against Tamil back in 2008. No Buddhist community, no Western Buddhist community, including Richard Gere and Dalai Lama's followers, are made to feel that they need to apologize. I mean, it indicates this positive Western Orientalism, where romanticizes, exceptionalizes the Buddhist people, Buddhist society, and Buddhism. And so I think that's one problem. The other one is
a kind of pedestal in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the other one is the religion. The social and political misuses and uses of religion, and then that is universal. Like all religious systems have been used throughout history over thousands of years by political and military classes for their strategic interest, and Buddhism is no exception. I was raised Buddhist. I'm from a very devout Buddhist family, and I consider myself, a fairly spiritual person, although I don't go to monastery or pray every day. But the point is that Buddhists are no special people. We are just like anyone. Every one of us is capable of doing heinous things to other human beings when the situation is mobilized.
What some people find surprising is, though, given the ethos and the ethics of the religion. Just take me there for a minute. Peter, I'm going to come to you in a second and talk to you about Aung Suu Kyi, who is a fascinating figure. Bahinder Digal, wonderful to have you back on the program. Thank you so much. Buddhist monk, professor of religion, philosophy and ethics, Bath Spa University. Now, without making any judgment on this, take us into the mindset of the Buddhist soldier who's involved in this, what has been described as a genocide, the politician who may describe themselves and see themselves as a devout Buddhist. What is driving this, and how are they justifying this to themselves?
I think the driving force is politics and nationalism, and I think closely associating it with Buddhism, I think we are not doing the justice. I think, of course, the West, since the Victorian time, has appreciated Buddhism, and there is rather misunderstanding.
Let me just take you back a little bit. The person who is part of the ethnic cleansing, part of one of those people carrying it out, and the genocide, who would also see themselves as a devout Buddhist. How are they reconciling that?
It is not possible to reconcile, because as a soldier, when you are in army, you are bound by rules, and so there's no place for your religious conviction.
But you also find justifications for it, don't you?
Yeah, I don't think the soldiers have a choice that they cannot kill. I think by definition, when you become a soldier, you have to kill. I think here in Myanmar, the case is very complex, but we have to think about Myanmar has 8 ethnic groups, and the Rohingya is supposed to be the 9th one, which is not recognized. So you have to see that there are 8 million Muslims in Myanmar, and it's 10% of the population, and Rohingya is about 800,000.
Do they feel under cultural threat?
I think so. I mean, when you think about generally, frankly speaking, if you talk to average people in Sri Lanka or Myanmar, there is a growing resentment. I don't know on what basis the resentment comes from, but partly because of the growth of the population and expansion of businesses, and in particular introduction of kind of unusual dresses, which is new to those cultures,
Interesting.
and the food habits and so on. So I think the prejudices are based on that.
Right. So there is those factors are coming into play consciously and indeed perhaps subconsciously as well. Back with you.
Yeah.
And Aung Suu Kyi. There we are. She won a Nobel Peace Prize, and she is presiding over or endorsing or acquiescing in this genocide. As one of my teenage daughters would say, what the hell?
Sure. I mean, your root question was, have we misunderstood Buddhism? Aung San Suu Kyi lived in England for about 24 years before she returned to Burma in 1988. I think it's a good argument that she actually misunderstood Buddhism herself.
Really? Yeah.
She arrived in Burma with the rather sort of sappy and simple-minded version of Buddhism that we have accepted here, that it's to do with calm, peacefulness, that basically you sit cross-legged and all is beautiful. For many of us, it's a kind of like the ideal religion which has no sin, which is not coercive, which is to do with complicated but beautiful concepts such as karma, nothing to do with state power.
Mm-hmm.
In Burma, where she arrived in 88, where she is now in power, Buddhism was powerfully conditioned by the reaction against colonialism. All of the leaders of the fight against British colonialism in Burma in the late 19th and the early 20th centuries were Buddhists, usually Buddhist monks. And they saw that what the British had done in Burma was basically remove the keystone of their society and sort of shatter it. And so, as happened in Sri Lanka in slightly different circumstances, the religion of 95% of the people and the sense of national identity and of patriotic self-preservation became fatally fused. And I think that's the core of the problem. As to Aung San Suu Kyi herself, who I've written about in 2 books, I think she's got trapped into a position where she's basically become the scapegoat for the actions of a military which is outside of her control because of the constitution.
Is she a prisoner of the generals in a sense?
She's a prisoner of the generals.
I disagree. I think, I shared a panel with Aung San Suu Kyi back in June 2012 when she first returned to England at the London School of Economics. She had already declared her presidential ambition,
Sure.
and there I was, an ordinary academic, and I was pre-assigned to handle this question that was emerging as the mass organized violence against Rohingya Muslim people. And why does she dodge her moral responsibility to confront this issue? The fact is, the ugliest thing that people don't want to believe because we have put her on the pedestal with the Mandela and Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. She is anti-Muslim racist. She talked to Michelle Hussein on Radio 4, and you yourself wrote
in my
she
book,
rushed out of the studio and saying that no one told me that a Muslim was going to be interviewing me. But what does Michelle's background have to do with it? She is racist. We must recognize her racism.
again.
Let's see what people think about this in the audience. Hello, good morning. I haven't heard from you yet. How are you?
Hi.
Aung San Suu Kyi.
The Buddhists, the Buddha taught that the Buddhists destroy Buddhism. It's not Islam which destroys Buddhism. It's the Buddhists by not considering it carefully enough. And so what is happening in Myanmar is that country is destroying Buddhism itself. You cannot call yourself a Buddhist country with that going on. It's just nonsense.
What about Aung San Suu Kyi? Should she have this Nobel Peace Prize rescinded? Any thoughts on that? Ayan, I see you going, yeah, blinking right, you should. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think that that should certainly be revoked. I mean, I don't see any. Either way, I totally agree with that gentleman over there with his statement. There's a lot to be looked into in terms of the country in itself, and it's about time, the right people sat around and actually addressed the issue forefront rather than going around.
Would you no platform her, or would you want her here for people to actually question her, to bring her to account, to make the points that they want to make, and to say to her face, you are a disgrace and you're anti-Muslim racist, and to hear her responses to that?
Honestly speaking, it's something that we want to actually put it to our membership in terms of student votes. So.
That's the first issue. So yeah, hello sir. What about this then? Mabrur Ahmed, director of Restless Beings. This is. Let me get back to the point about mentality here, because there's this man Waratu, isn't it? This militant monk. Who is kind of leading this. He's a great sort of ideological wellspring of what's happening here. He would call himself a Buddhist, wouldn't he?
He would call himself a Buddhist. I think I'm just going to go back to your question at the beginning.
Please do.
Which is, has the West misunderstood Buddhism? I think we have a problem with an Orientalist view of. It's a very selective Orientalist view, because to be honest with you, I don't think there's any world religion which is not peace-loving. But when we select Buddhism as this kind of idealistic, non-sin religion, as a religion which we want to put up on a pedestal, so there's a problem there from our perspective. But there's also an issue of mixing together xenophobia and nationalism to a religion, because just as Zarni mentioned before, whenever there seems to be any sort of Islamist terrorist attack, the Muslim world has to come out and publicly denounce these kind of actions and almost apologize for these things, and it forces this kind of culture of becoming apologists. We've got to be careful not to vindicate Buddhism to do the same sort of thing, right? Because perhaps that's not the way we should be doing with Islamist terrorism as well. So far as Wiratu is concerned, he is no different to Bin Laden, and that's according to his own definition. He called himself the Buddhist Bin Laden.
He believes he's a Buddhist.
He believes he's a Buddhist Bin Laden, but so did Bin Laden believed he was a Muslim.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that the vast majority of the Muslims would subscribe to his ideology of Islam.
Yeah.
And I don't think the vast majority of Buddhists subscribe to the ideology that Wiratu kind of propagates. But here's the issue. When we're coming about the Rohingya issue, we're talking about an ethno and a religious attack on a community, the Rohingya community. But it's not based on principles of religion that the Rakhine community and that the Burmese authorities are attacking these people on. It's on the very premise of the Rohingya's religion, right? This is because they're Muslim. That's the reason why they're being attacked, and that's the reason that they're being ostracized and marginalized. Not necessarily because Buddhism is problematic.
Yes, no, go on.
So I think both Wiratu and Buddhism, they're basically sideshows. I mean, the real deal is the military. The military patronizes Wiratu and another monk named more senior than Wiratu named Sidaku. Aung San Suu Kyi just awarded her the highest Buddhist award to the man who said that the non-believers, the non-Buddhists are only one half human beings, and therefore killing them by the millions, it's not bad karma.
We've heard this all before through history since time immemorial from religion. My humanist friend right now is going, there we go again. Religion. Allow me to take over here, if I may, because you mentioned a very important point about it in the military. So, Peter, let's follow the money here, which is always a useful road to go on. Well, I mean, what's China's role? What's going on economically? What are the forces that are driving this?
Well, one of the reasons that the military are able to get away with this appalling, the rapid biggest refugee exodus in history is because they got the two biggest countries in the world which border Burma are both looking on approvingly. But China is perfectly happy to see Burma acting in this way because it helps to secure Rakhine state for Chinese investment. Meanwhile, you've got the Indian nationalists, the Hindu nationalists in India who've been in power under Modi for the past years, who are perfectly at home with an Islamophobic policy because they're equally Islamophobic themselves. So it's an extreme, that part of the world, which is, you know, the birthplace of the great religions, the great home of spiritual values, has turned extremely toxic in the past 5-10 years.
Mahendra, I said I would come back to you.
I think still I think the colonial past is a very important one because I think these groups came, it started from 1826. You know, the citizenship law 1982 prohibit giving citizenship to these people. So one of the solutions that not the Buddhists but the state has to do to offer the citizenship to these people, and then if the citizenship is offered to these people, I think the problem is going to go away. I think denying them citizenship is an issue, and I think the colonial masters also has to be responsible for it.
No, I think you know, with all due respect to the Reverend here, I disagree. I think the historical presence of Rohingyas predated the British colonization, which began in 1824. I mean, Michael can chime in. I mean, we've got you know, a top-notch historian who can speak on the Rohingya.
We haven't got much time. Go for it, Michael.
Well, the Rohingyas have been there for hundreds of years, and actually a lot of the Buddhists in Arakan and Rakhine are actually immigrants themselves. The problem is that the Burmese military is trying to put its imprint of what they see as Burma onto each of the peripheral areas. So that's why the Kachin and other minority groups are facing problems as well. They're just going to turn everything into what the Burma looks like in the Irrawaddy Valley.
What about intervention from the rest of the world? We said
all the world wants Burma because it's a strategic position. It's a strategic position that has natural gas. China wants it for access to the Indian Ocean. The U.S. wants strategic partnership to balance out China. Nobody's willing to get involved now like they did in the 1990s. Even then, they had to be pushed into sanctions.
But this is a genocide, isn't it?
We have to be very clear.
Yeah, I mean, when this happened to Rwanda, we look back in shame.
If these were white Europeans, then we would have already been involved.
I mean, that's why, like David Reeve, you know, the author of A Bed for the Night, said never again has been, turned into this a poor taste joke. You know, he said, never again is meant to, or seems meant to mean that, never in Europe Germany will kill the Jewish community. I mean, like, to look at it, I mean, like, since 1948.
But it happens again and again and again. 20 seconds, we're out of time.
We have to be very careful not to call for interventionism because that's been problematic everywhere else in the world as well. Yeah. At the same time, we can't expect to see a genocide happen before our eyes and not do anything. So the real question isn't, has the West misunderstood Buddhism? The real question is, has the West misunderstood its role that it could play in places like Burma? Because it seems like there's oil, we're after it.
Thank you, that was really so interesting. Thank you very much indeed. As always, the debates continue online, on Twitter. Now next week, we're in Bradford, so do join us then. We're up and running. For now, can I say goodbye? Thank you for watching, and have a really good